So this is episode number 3 of the day. Do a little audio clap to sync the audio. And to whoever's editing this, we don't have a clapper. We'll get one eventually.
Not yet.
But yeah. Blake, I'm glad you got the orange memo, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
We're trying to color coordinate these things.
This was my dad's shirt. Man, I remember him wearing this when I was a kid.
Really? Oh, I bet he rocked it, dude.
He did. He came over one day last year and was like, "Hey, I'm getting rid of this. Do you want it?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Can't get rid of that. It's a work of art.
That's what I'm saying. So paired with my Bluff Park hat, we're ready to go.
Well, I know we've talked in the past about you're always diving into new properties to flip, and you currently have a property in Bluff Park. For those familiar with the Alabama area in Birmingham, it's is Bluff Park part of Hoover, or is it its own incorporated city?
Yeah, it's part of Hoover, just a community within, if you will.
Okay.
So it was kind of short story because we live in Bluff Park. It was invited. Every property owner in Bluff Park was invited to annex into Hoover, I think in the 80s, and my house, my property, decided not to.
Really?
And so we are unincorporated Jefferson County, which the schools are a little subpart of Hoover's schools, and so we have submitted to annex into the city, and it's just a process and shouldn't be an issue because we're in the middle of Hoover.
I didn't know you couldn't do it if the surrounding area is part of it.
So when they came in the 80s or whenever it was, they asked each, like, do you want to come into Hoover for our better schools, but also a little bit higher taxes? And most everyone said yes, but you can go on the Jefferson County tax map and actually look and see there's a handful up there that says
there's this handful of houses there, just Jefferson County.
One little property. So our little property right there is unincorporated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, apart from that, we'll call it Bluff Park,
So,
unincorporated Jefferson County. You've got a house up there that you've been flipping, and we talked about that in one of the episodes. You actually had a funny photo when you closed on the house.
Yeah, Mr. Wayne.
Mr. Wayne. I know he's going through some stuff right now. So
he's gotten sick and in the hospital and ended up in the ICU. So any prayer warriors out there, hit up Mr. Wayne. He's on the road to recovery. But
okay, that's good to hear. So how is that property going? And what's the latest on that?
Yeah, it's good. Got permits into demo. Got our budget set, our subs lined up. Looking to get material and lining up. I think we talked about this before, but Mr. Wayne's done every industry, every job in the world, and one of those things was owning a car shop and like a mechanic shop and kind of a scrap yard. And because this was not his primary residence, he kind of used this property as his storage facility / everything else, workshop. And there were 11 cars on the property when we bought, one of them being this 1999 Toyota Landcruiser.
Okay.
That was in the backyard in just overgrown jungle. I mean, it hadn't been cut in years and years and years. It's 5 cars, and one of them is this Landcruiser.
So just a quick history lesson. Yeah. Landcruiser is owned by, is that Toyota?
It's Toyota.
Okay, so you have you have Range Rovers, you have Land Rovers, and then you have Land Cruisers.
Yep.
And I think there may even be a 4th variation,
Yeah.
but we're talking about the Landcruiser.
Landcruiser.
One of them's like really rare and hard to find, and like you see them in like Australia and stuff like that. I don't know if those are the Landcruisers or Land Rovers.
Man, I honestly don't know. I know for like the 90s models, like I don't think either of them are super rare, but if you go back to like 60s, 70s, and 80s, you've got all the different, like those super cool Jeeps you see in like the movies.
See them like in safari scenes.
Like those are like the old Landcruisers.
Okay.
Yeah. So they've got a long history, and they're just known. I've come to learn all this as I've kind of looked into this car. Known as like the most reliable car ever, and this
Toyota, I think they were like the #1 selling auto manufacturer of 2022.
Yeah,
like they sold more vehicles than the most successful car company on the planet, basically. Yeah,
and I don't doubt. I'm on my second Tundra. My first one had 280,000 miles and worked perfectly.
Yeah.
I just had an opportunity to upgrade and did it. So I love them. I love Toyota.
I do too. I'm in the Tacoma Club.
Yeah,
so
there we go.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I want this car. So I was asking Mr. Wayne, hey, what are you going to do with it? Whose is it? And he goes, well, it actually belongs to a buddy of mine who I did a job for like 6 years ago. And he's in the car business as well. And it was just kind of an extra one he had. It was in my way doing the job at his house. And so I said,
what about the other 8 cars that were on the property?
He has slowly gotten them off. There's still, to this day, we're 9-10 weeks after closing, there's still 2 sitting in the front yard.
Dude, I could imagine this property. no disrespect to Mr. Wayne, but maybe a little bit of an eyesore for the neighborhood, just
Yeah,
having a bunch of junk cars and
it
stuff.
was, man. There were, because in the driveway, he took 8 or 9 12-foot trailer loads to the scrapyard. So it was all, engines and.
I'm sure everybody's like, finally, Blake's got the property. We can trust him. He's going to clean it up.
I try to keep the neighbors happy by, keeping noise down or whatever, but they inherently are like pretty glad that it's getting cleaned up. So it's good to raise their values. And I'm a neighbor to this property as well, so it's going to should help me.
Yeah.
But so all these cars, and he was like, yeah, it belongs to this guy I'm doing a job for. We can just park it at my extra house up in Bluff Park while we're doing this job. And 6 years later, the guy just hadn't come and gotten it. He hadn't forgotten about it, but just hadn't taken the time to come get it.
So it's just been sitting there.
Just been sitting. And so for weeks, I was like, Mr. Wayne, have you talked to this guy? Will he sell it to me? I want it. And he's like, oh, he's just not answering the phone. So finally, I was like, can you give me his number? Can I call him?
Yeah.
And he was like, sure. I don't want to deal with it. So the guy answers like first ring. I was like, not convinced that Wayne was even trying. But he's a busy guy. So I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, I bought that 8 years ago. I'm in the import-export car business all over the world, which alludes to my shirt. He exports to Africa.
Yeah.
So this is why I wore this. And he's like, I bought it just because I found a good deal on it. He's like, I personally drive a 99 Landcruiser just because I love them. Didn't need another one, but didn't really want to export it because I liked it. So it was just kind of extra. And so it wasn't doing me any harm not being in my driveway. And so
it doesn't have the steering wheel on the right side, right?
No, it doesn't. That'd be cool.
Okay.
No, it's an came from
version.
Florida. Then I've pulled all the research. Started in Florida. Was there for most of its life, and then went to Mississippi, and then came to this guy 8 years ago. So I was like, all right, well, I'm interested in buying it. Would you sell it? And he said, well, I really like it. Didn't really want to. I was kind of hoping I could come over and just throw a battery in it and drive it home. And I was like, well, when was the last time you saw this car? And he's like, it's probably been 4 or 5 years. And this thing, moisture had gotten in it. There's mold all in it. The tires are dry rotted. Yeah. It's just disgusting. And, we lift up the engine compartment. There's like rat nests in it that have chewed up stuff in the engine bay. It's torn apart. I'm like, well, and he said, well, and we'll talk about numbers, but he said, I paid, I think, $5,500 for it like 8 years ago. Don't really want to lose money, but I don't have to make money. So, I'd be looking to get that out of it. And I said, well, before we talk numbers, why don't you just come over and look at it so you know the kind of condition of what we're dealing with here.
I think you need to see this.
Yeah. And it was, this was kind of right before this. It was in the backyard. I was like, I really need this car out of the way. And so I actually had it towed to my I've got like kind of a lower driveway. It's kind of my own junkyard. I pulled it down there. I got it towed down to there. I was like, come over, here's my address, come look at it. And he came over and was a little shocked. It's like, okay, I see a lot of labor that's needed, a lot of cleaning, but overall the components should be pretty good. He, being in the car business and fix stuff up, obviously understands that way better than I do. I told him I can build a house, but I don't know anything about engines. So if it's got engine problems, I'm out of luck. So he said, all right, well, I'll take a little less for it, maybe like 4 for it. What do you think? And again, not knowing what I'm getting into, and at this point, not really knowing the value of them, just knowing that it's like a cool car, and they're super reliable. It's got 200,000 miles on it, but he was like, I've sold these with 600,000 miles on it.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's just
my
crazy.
gosh.
And it'd just be cool to, have a little play car on the side, but I don't want a super expensive play car.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, look, why don't we do this? Let's get creative. Because he told me he's invested in some real estate and flipped some houses before, and he's just a super nice guy. Like I hope to be friends with this guy forever because he's just very interesting and has done a lot in his life. And so I was like, well, why don't I give you like half that now, and then, if let's do a real estate deal together, and then, I'll help you out on like the maybe commission side, or like I can, send you a deal that maybe you can make some more money on, and then I can make you whole and maybe get you up to like 5,000 total. And he was like, that's pretty interesting. And I was like, yeah, let's get creative, right? And something where it's a win-win. So, I don't. It just doesn't make sense for me to
And he was
spend
open
too
to
much.
that.
Well, he said, let me think about it.
Okay.
So a couple of days went by, and there was another car on Wayne's property, or now my property, he was picking up. So he texted me about it. Hey, we're coming to get the little red car today. Perfect, no problem. Have you thought about the Landcruiser offer? He said, and so I have no chill, right? So the day that I made that offer, let's call it a Tuesday. The day he texted to come get the red car was a Friday. Well, between Tuesday and Friday, again, no chill. I just started working on the car.
You start cleaning it up.
Dude,
and stuff.
I gutted. I took the seats out, took all the carpet out, took the insulation out. We were like taking the engine apart. Shouldn't have done it. But
technically, it's still his car.
It is his car. Would have to be done anyways, so I'm improving it for him. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this podcast. Maybe he does, but
he didn't come by and look at it.
Well, so no, he did, and so that's that's where we're sitting today. It is
okay.
I've spent $0, but I've spent probably 8 hours on the car, which again is, if you look back on the entire principle that we talk about in this podcast, is stupid, because if I go spend 8 hours trying to sell a house or make money, I could buy 5 of these in the same amount of time. But there's something about just getting my hands dirty and getting in there and learning. I've never gotten into a car like this, so it's just that's kind of free time for me, right? I don't look at it as like trading my time for money. It's just like that's free time for me. Yeah, which is weird for a lot of people to get, but I enjoy it. So. And I've got a buddy who kind of enjoys that kind of stuff too, so he's come over and helped me. And so we've got this thing fully apart. And today, and then, so fast forward. So I follow up. He asked about the red car, and I said, have you thought about the Landcruiser offer? And currently, when I send that text, it's gutted in my driveway. He goes, yeah, I don't really see any like transactions coming up in my future. I'll just come pick it up. I'm like, well, and so I was like, all right, well, let's talk about it a little bit more. Could you come off the 4 a little bit more? And I give him a number, and he says, well, let me look at my numbers and let me think about it.
It's crazy that he would still be this attached to this vehicle. I don't know, just me.
Well, for him, I think it's just about the number. He just doesn't want to lose a bunch of money and doesn't want the risk of not.
How far is that car depreciated? That initial $5,500 over the course of 6 to 8 years that's just sat there doing nothing.
The thing is, it's appreciated.
Wow, really?
Those cars,
even
it's
in
insane,
that condition, it's still
because as long as there's nothing wrong with the engine, I don't think he's wrong where it's labor, but there's not a lot of like expense. Like it needs tires, and maybe like a couple things sewn up in the seats, but it doesn't need. So I think he's right in that. So
okay, wow.
So we're in a spot, and it's appreciated, so it's worth probably more than what he paid. I really don't know, but he knows better than I do, and he probably recognizes that. So I'm like, well, at the end of the day, I'll probably give him the 4 that he wanted, but if I can save more, because tires are going to be close to $1,000.
Yeah,
again, I don't need this is a second extra car. I don't need a ton of expenses into it.
So he says he's coming to get it. You say, hold up, let's renegotiate.
Yeah.
A little
So
more.
what will you take? So that's where we sit.
Okay.
We sit there today. So next podcast we'll have an update on
the Landcruiser saga. It's a Landcruiser.
Landcruiser.
Okay. I don't know much about them, but I feel like they are.
2 weeks ago I knew nothing about them 2 weeks ago, and I've gone just a deep dive.
Are they still manufactured?
Yes. Brand new ones are like $100,000.
Really?
They're nuts.
That's crazy.
They're crazy. Yeah.
My brother's running sound off camera. Do you know anything about Landcruisers?
I know they're expensive.
He knows they're expensive.
They are cool. Yeah.
Especially the old vintage ones.
Yeah. So I want to put like cool tires on it, put the roof rack and the
go do some off-roading, do some camping, Talladega
I don't know
National
how
Forest
much I'd actually use it. I just wanted to look cool, just drive around town. So we'll see. We'll see where we end up on that. Again, it's a fully all the people are like, oh, you're wasting so much time. You could go.
We'll talk about acquiring hobbies. Yeah. It's like, oh, my schedule isn't busy enough. Let me add a car project into the mix of my life.
Yeah, throw that into the woodworking and the golf cart we're flipping.
And the piano playing and the
golf and
time with the family and all that other stuff. We're kind of getting off subject a little bit. But, trying to mitigate our hobbies. Dirt bikes are like the latest thing that's on our minds. So we're like, over the Christmas holiday, right now at the time of this recording, we're about late January of 2023. Just sitting around the fireplace, hanging out with family, and just pulling up old dirt bike videos we used to watch as kids and stuff. And so got the wheels turning, and now we're like, I'm saving money now, but it's like my brain is always able to find new and interesting ways to spend money.
Yeah.
So I've been really good. A friend of mine tried to get me into one-wheeling. Shout out Alex. Those are really expensive, and I was probably the most disciplined I've ever been when it comes to a purchase. And I didn't allow I was like, I really analyzed it, like, how much time am I going to spend with this? You know, is it worth the cost to get into this? Am I really going to use it? Because before that, I dove into, no pun intended, scuba diving.
Hey.
And I got scuba certified, and that's not a cheap endeavor.
Yeah.
And bought all the gear and everything, and we went scuba diving twice. And so I'm sitting on all this gear, and my uncle has promised that once it warms up, he's saying that the cold weather is the culprit as to why we haven't been diving.
Yeah.
But I'm just hoping this isn't yet another hobby where I just have a bunch of junk in my basement, and then I just lose interest and don't pursue it. And I've dumped, you know, more money than I'm willing to admit into it. So,
but now you know about the money because you're tracking it, and it's,
yes.
it's
So
that's
I'll
pretty
spin
cool.
it all around and kind of keep it on a subject. Just trying to do better with my spending and really like. It's so funny. I mentioned my brother earlier, who's running sound for us. When me and him decided to get into kayaking, we had done the dirt bike thing, you know, about 8 years ago. And I said,
shaking his
hey,
head.
I don't know. I said, hey, let's get some kayaks. You know, that'd be fun. This is about the height of the pandemic, so we're looking for things to get outside and do. And one of the things he told me over the phone, he's like, if we invest in kayaks, we better use them. I am done spending money on hobbies with you that we don't pursue. And so I'm happy to report that the kayaking really took off, and we used them a lot and continue to use them.
That's awesome.
I don't know why we got on kayaking.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Went down
Yeah,
that.
it's so that house we're doing. You know, I going into it, we've talked about, you know, my goals for flips, and the one we did in Irondale is, you know, put a contractor on it, call me when you're done, kind of idea. And going into this one, I knew writing the contract that I'm breaking my own rule for what I was paying for it, because you know it's a common phrase: you make your money when you buy, right? If you overpay, then you've already lost your money, no matter what you do to the property. And I'm on the tight end of the budget, knowing that it would take what we pay. We pay $255 for the property, knowing that it was going to be tight. But there was it came with that extra lot that I wanted to keep, and that was kind of the for lack of a better term, emotional reason of overpaying, quote, overpaying, is because that extra property is right past my house where the road dead ends, and it was going to be sold. And anyone besides me buying it would probably build a house there, which I wanted to prevent.
Have a little more privacy.
Yeah,
sure.
And so
an outside incentive to, you know,
so
beyond
I
just
guess,
the monetary.
Yeah, I guess in a nutshell, if we break even on the property, I got a free lot kind of thing is how I look at it. But because of that, I can't just put my contractor on there and say, call me when you're done, because his budget was like $50,000 more than I could afford. And so now I'm going all the way back to my beginnings of not quite swinging a hammer, but I may a little bit.
Maybe more hands-on involved in this property than you have in ones in the past.
Yeah, and more management of like, all right, let me source the guys to do the demo. Let me source the guys to do the sheetrock. Let me buy the sheetrock and have it delivered. Do I got to haul the sheetrock from the driveway to inside? Like doing that kind of stuff, which it being so close to my house is probably
About to
to
say,
my detriment.
it could be worse, you know. At
Well,
least on this one, you're able to kind of check it out on your way home.
Yeah, but it being farther away would force me to just have someone else do it. But now that it's so close, it's like I get home at 5, where normally I would, hey, let's cook dinner and hang out with Stella. It's like, let me just run over the property real quick.
TV dinner, I got to go do this for a couple hours, I'll be back.
Yeah, and then I started a fire and I got to wait for it to burn down, so I'll see you at 10. It's like, so, you know, I got to, Rachel continues to tell me, like, all right, you've got to run this more like, you know, like it's a job and a business and not, you know, a hobby.
A hobby, yeah. So I guess the theme of this episode is time management.
Management.
And I don't understand. You are arguably one of the busiest people that I have the fortune of knowing, and just that's a whole other episode. It's just how you manage your time and stuff. That'd be a good.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a good one. You know, just talk about how you don't keep pulling your hair out.
Yeah.
But it's always good to catch up, man. And like I said, that shirt's awesome. So
Thank you.
until next time, man.
See you next time.
See ya.